This is Sarah Levitt with the Making Magnificence Project. And today, my guest is Ian Kerner. I'm going to read his bio in just a second. But as a frame for this conversation, this is an interview that falls under the Healing Conversations for the Making Magnificence Project. And I couldn't be happier than to be having one of those with Ian Kerner, who is a licensed psychotherapist and nationally recognized sex therapist who has been featured in The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Economist, and NPR. He also contributes regularly on the topic of relationships for CNN and lectures frequently with recent presentations for the Psychotherapy Networkers Symposium, the Ackerman Institute, Tony Robbins, Goop, and TED 2021. Ian is also the New York Times bestselling author of She Comes First, which has been translated into more than a dozen languages, as well as the recently published So Tell Me About the Last Time You Had Sex, which is a great title.
Thank you.
In addition to being a clinical fellow of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, Ian is certified by the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and is also a member of the American Family Therapy Academy. He is the co-founder and co-director of the sex therapy program at the Institute for Contemporary Psychotherapy, one of the oldest and most respected not-for-profit mental health training and treatment facilities in New York City. So when I chose someone to have a conversation about sex, I knew what I was doing. Ian Kerner, welcome to the Making Magnificence Project.
Nice to be here, Sarah.
I'm super excited to have you here. And I know we've been trying to have this conversation for a bit. And so I'm excited about all the directions that we can take. I think the first place I want to start, because of your extraordinary experience and kind of longevity in the field, what is top of mind for you right now? What are you most curious about?
Well, one thing that I've been noticing amongst, especially my millennial couples and Gen Zers that I see is how the role of sexual attraction and the role of lust continues to get deprioritized and deprivileged as a priority in picking a life partner. I really believe that sexual connection is a glue that allows us as couples to move through the life cycle and take on some of the biggest burdens and challenges that life has to offer, and that sexuality is a real source of rejuvenation and connection and replenishment. So it's curious to me in this era, I guess, where there's more choices for how to structure relationships, right? People are choosing non-monogamy and choosing polyamory, that the role of lust itself in the selection process seems to be getting a little deprioritized. So I wouldn't say that that's the fundamental feature of my practice, but you asked me for sort of areas that I'm interested in or curious about.
That's
I think the
wow.
other,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, I was like, did I just hear him right? Did he say deprioritize? Because, we associate typically, if we're going to speak in broad generalizations, we might associate kind of youth with certainly lustfulness as a priority. And so if you had to guess what's happening there,
Well, I think definitely more people are trading off sex for security and safety. I think that more and more people feel that they should be marrying their best friends potentially as opposed to their lovers. I think that there's a lot of myths as well about how sex unfolds in marriages and long-term relationships. I think a lot of young couples that I work with will say, well, why should we pick for sex when married couples stop having sex anyway? Or you
interesting.
can't have sex, you can't have lust and love in the same person. And I've had lots of lust in the past, and it's never worked out relationally. And then I think the thing that I hear most, which I think is kind of a myth, is, well, we've got everything else, so surely we'll be able to create this at some point down the line. And well, down the line is sitting on my couch.
So I'm mindful of our time, Ian, because I already have like 50 questions in my head. So I want to make sure that I could talk to you for hours. So in a way, um, this sounds like a conversation we could have been having in the 50s.
Yeah, except in the 50s, there were, I think gender roles were more traditionally defined when we were looking at
Yes,
heterosexual couples. And so I think that today's couples are coming in expecting their partners to, I think those gender roles have shifted. I think more couples are in egalitarian relationships as opposed to traditional structures. There's more emphasis on the two income household and whatnot. So I'm not so sure. I wasn't doing this back in the 50s. So, but I don't
just kind
know.
of what you're describing, like choosing security over, in terms of prioritization over lust, for example, right? That sounds like almost a bygone era, or certainly a note from a different era. So that's why I'm curious about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating.
Perhaps. I mean, I think yeah, I'm seeing it across men and women. This
And
idea
women. Wow.
that, we are best friends and we can bring a safety and a comfort to each other. Yeah, it's curious, but more and more I'm seeing this, and then I'm always surprised. So, are you planning to open up your relationship
Right.
since you've chosen each other for life and you want to have kids? You do have kids. Are you planning? Nope, nope. We weren't planning to open up the relationship. So I think it's really just a deprioritization of sex, or this idea that, maybe sex is not something that you should be selecting for. It's not the mature choice. It's not the responsible choice.
Okay, all right, so what is lust? And where does it fit into a construct like a marriage? What would you say lust is? So if they're deprioritizing this, what are you seeing that they're setting aside or deprioritize? What is lust?
Well, I mean,
And is it mature, Ian?
well, for the couples who have not picked their partners based on lust, the thing that they are missing most in their relationships is feeling desired. They're not necessarily missing the sex itself. They are often missing the sex itself, but the thing that they'll tell you that they're missing even more is this feeling of being wanted, this feeling of being desired, this feeling of wanting to be hungered for, even objectified
Mhm.
by partners. So I think it is sort of something that's kind of just fundamental to humanity.
Yeah, and you would say it sounds like, push back if I don't have this, that it's also fundamental to marriage, that you would make the argument that security can coexist with lust and desire. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. Can monogamy be effective? Can you have it all in picking a partner? Can you pick a great partner who's going to be a great parent and a responsible part of your family and a fun companion, as well as someone you want to undress and throw on the bed? Absolutely.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and again, I think that maintaining that lust and cultivating it and enjoying both the experience of desiring and being desired, as well as the sexual events and experiences that that desire leads to. I think that that is a fundamental source of relationship resilience, a very
Hmm.
powerful source, maybe the most powerful source of relationship
Say
resilience.
more about that.
Well, again, just that I don't think that sex should be underestimated or
Hmm.
devalued. In a relationship. I
Hmm.
sometimes feel like when it comes time to picking our partners, not necessarily our friends with benefits or our, casual sex experiences, but I feel like when it comes to picking that life partner, it's almost like the board of directors for for ourselves get together, and there's the
Totally.
work selves and the family selves, and we're all sitting around a table saying, what do we think of this potential partner? And then the lust part of ourselves speaks up and says, well, not really feeling it. I know all the rest of you are totally into this person. Great parent, great companion, great professional and provider, lots of security, lots of friendship. I'm not totally feeling it though. I'm not off the charts. And I think the other board members sort of say, well, you don't really get a vote in this as
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
You're impulsive. You're immature. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
uh, you're not part of the long-term proposition of picking a mate. But in the end, studies show that, for example, lust plays a big role in lust plays a big role in mate selection and potentially in producing the healthiest offspring. When people are given what's classically called the smell test or the T-shirt test, and someone
Isn't that
said,
wild? Yeah.
smell this
Yeah.
t-shirt, and
Yeah.
does this smell like a lover or
Yeah.
a brother? People are like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, this smells like the brother, put it over there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
after the t-shirts where someone smells like a lover, and scent plays a big role in mate selection and actually producing the most genetically fit offspring. So I would say if we actually want to produce the kids best children, we should follow our noses and let lust lead, you know?
What is it about? What do you think? Yeah, no, I could talk to you for 10 hours. What is it that you think right now in the culture is equating lust with immaturity?
Um, what is equating lust
Like,
with
why is that link being made right now? Because I hear it too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with sort of just the online dating and the treadmill
Mm-hmm.
of the apps and sort of
Yeah.
wanting to get off that
Mm.
treadmill and I'm not a sociologist. I'm just a sex therapist.
You just treat the people when they're
I'm
coming through
telling
the
you what I'm
door.
seeing and what sort
Yeah.
of boggles my mind. And
Yeah. Is I've also heard the argument that attraction slash lust is really just a that we're drawn to kind of the familiar um, and the trauma that we've experienced in life. Would you speak to that?
that we are drawn to the familiar and to the trauma. Well, you
Yeah.
know,
And
I
that's what attraction is, that sense of kind of butterflies and that it's actually trauma being stirred within us. I've heard that argument too. Would you speak to that?
I think that sometimes we are enacting childhood dynamics in unhealthy ways in the relationship partners that we're picking. There's something that sort of some gets referred to as the reparative fantasy that I may fall in love with someone who feels very familiar to me from my childhood and perhaps feels most familiar to me in terms of some of the unhealthiest dynamics or the dynamics that created the most attachment needs and anxieties. I might be drawn to a person who replays those attachments, but in the in the disposition of infatuation and love, it feels like I'm almost getting what I was denied, my whole life. So maybe I'm picking someone who reminds me a lot of my neglectful mother, but through the lens of infatuation, I'm experiencing enormous attention. And look, there is a difference between lust is a component of infatuation, but infatuation does wane. And so once infatuation wanes, if all I am left with are ultimately the original dynamics from which I was trying to escape, well, then I'm stuck back in those sort of, I wouldn't necessarily call them trauma because trauma is a word that gets so overused
Yes.
to the point
Yes.
that it becomes, a useless
Yes.
word, but all of us, but that doesn't mean that we haven't all experienced, unhealthy dynamics that feel familiar to us, that we can wear like an old familiar coat and find ourselves repeating old dynamics. A lot of us do, and hopefully we gain the insight and the catharsis to seek from a healthier place in ourselves.
I wonder if I'm asking about this because I wonder if that's the link to this argument about maturity, that when we're healed, and I'm deliberately putting that, when we're healed, we make different choices, essentially not from our younger selves, but healthier choices, which would be, immaturity might be on one end. I'm making this up, but immaturity might be on one end of the scale and kind of health might be on the other. And so I was curious, that's why I was poking around there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I work with a lot of couples, and
Hmm.
sometimes couples are sometimes an individual is picking from a place in themselves in which they've already grown and evolved, and they are, I think picking a partner who can offer safety and security and as well as growth and actualization. And sometimes we're picking a partner from a younger place in ourselves or a younger part in ourselves, and the work we have may be to grow together. So I've seen couples grow
That's
and
beautiful. Yeah.
evolve
Yeah.
together as
Yeah.
well. I've also seen plenty of people evolve and leave their partners behind,
Yes. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
they can't go on that journey together.
Yeah. So, this kind of goes to my second question because I've heard you say that sex is another planet, and it sounds like lust is another planet. Um, so I've heard you say here that it's this kind of resilient place where people can connect, particularly people in marriage, despite what else is going on. Can you say more about kind of sex is another planet?
Well, I'm trying to think. When I said sex is, another planet, I think what I'm a couple of things. One is that, um, excuse me, for 1 second, I just want
Sure.
to turn something off that just came on. Um, I think that sex has its own language, first of all. I
Yeah.
think, the
Yeah.
language of our relationships is not the language of lust. And I think that sex has its own language, and we need to be able to drop into that language. It's funny, I was working with a couple not too long ago, and they could not talk about sex at all. They couldn't bring themselves, like, they were completely avoidant. And then I happened to be at a very expensive restaurant with a very expensive tasting menu.
Nice.
Um, and this couple was a few tables down where I could see them, and they didn't really notice me. And I noticed about this couple how they were really oohing and eyeing over the food and putting their spoons in each other's mouths, and they were effectively having a very sensual
Yeah.
experience with the food. And I was
Yeah.
like, wow, they can do this with food, but they can't actually do it with sex. They can have all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
talking and tasting and sensuality. And so I think we do grow up in cultures that are sex negative, in homes that are sex negative and sex avoidant. And so sex is its own planet in terms of it has its own atmosphere, it can have its own language. We have to be able to drop into the planet of sex. The other thing that I think I meant when I said that statement is that um, a lot of couples therapists, especially, don't quite know how to handle the topic of
For
sexuality. I
sure.
educate the therapists about sexuality, and a lot of therapists will sort of will deal with a sexual complaint by saying, well, let's work on your relationship, let's work on your communication. A sex problem is not a sex problem, it's a relationship problem. So let's look at what's wrong in the relationship, because if we look at what's wrong if we can fix what's wrong in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, the sex will naturally fix itself, which is a logic that I have never completely understood because sex is its own
Yeah.
planet. It exists as
Yeah.
part of the relational solar system, but
Yeah.
it needs to be sexual issues need to be addressed directly as sexual issues. And there was a study done that showed out of Toronto that showed that couples who have healthy sex once a week have higher levels of relationship positivity than couples who do not have sex once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Couples who had sex two, three, four, 5 times a week also had high levels of relationship positivity, but not necessarily more than the couples who just had sex once a week. But the couples who had sex less than once a week had
Mm.
lower levels of relationship positivity than the couples who had sex once a week. So it's not just that like having a good relationship gives us a good sex life, having a good sex life gives us a good relationship as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm hearing that. And you're so in your many years of experience, what I'm hearing you say, tell me if I've got this, is that you can fix the relationship. You can fix it, fix the dynamic, whatever the tumult might be. And that's distinct from what might be going on sexually and in the bedroom.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I would imagine that that is, Ian, because you train therapists, but I would imagine that's contrary to what a lot of therapists think, which is that that sex is whatever's going on in the marriage sexually is just a byproduct of the dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to have a good enough, I think in any sort of committed relationship, you need to have a good enough relationship to have a good enough sex life. I think the
Hmm.
emphasis is on good enough, not on perfect. But having a good enough relationship does not lead to having a good sex life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so at the top of the conversation, when you first opened, you were talking about how some people think when they're kind of estimating attraction and lust, some people are kind of thinking, well, they're picking a partner and maybe it can develop over time. Can you talk about lust and how it exists? Is it kind of the instant, whatever that thing is, that chemical thing, right, that happens between us? Or can it be that that chemical thing does develop over? Can you speak to that?
Um, I think there's a difference between lust and between lust and attraction and pleasure. Uh, I work with so let's go first to lust. I do believe that there is a big bang that sort of happens at the beginning with lust, and that um, you can experience that, and I don't think you can expect it to stay at that sort of like explosive brightness, but I think that big bang, so to speak, can cast a halo effect
Mm,
life cycle of a relationship, and that you can always bask in the
mm,
radiance of lust,
mm,
and that it
mm.
can be continued to be warmed and to be cultivated. If you don't have that at the beginning, I think it's going to be, and look, I think you can have it at the beginning and you can lose it. And I think hopefully you can re-find it unless you've so neglected it or so corrupted it that it's irreparably gone. If it was never there in the beginning, then I think you end up like some of the couples I have on my couch who are great best friends, but they are just do not feel the lust. They're not lovers. Now, are they attracted to each other? Sure, they're attracted to each other. They just don't experience lust, but they're attracted to each other in many different ways. There are
Okay,
many
hang
other
on. Let me pause
qualities.
you. Let me pause you. So, what's the distinction you're making?
Well, I can be attracted to many different qualities in somebody.
Okay.
Right? I mean, attraction is more than just sexual attraction.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think that lust and sexual attraction are pretty much one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that so the question is, can couples who have broader attraction to each other, but don't necessarily have sexual attraction to each other, can they create sustainable, contented sex lives with each other? Um, I would argue that it's very
That's
challenging.
what I'm
There,
hearing you say. I was going to
I
clarify
have
that. Yeah.
contemporaries, so I have peers, I don't know if you've gotten to talk to Emily Nagoski, for example, but she's another very renowned sex educator, and she believes that she maintains that pleasure is the measure, and that
Mm.
rather than focusing on orgasm per se or lust per se, that we should be focused on co-creating pleasure. And so can two people who don't experience lust for each other co-create pleasurable experiences that even include orgasm? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's up to those couples to decide, is that enough?
And so lust is for you, is it kind of, well, I don't want to put word, what is lust, Ian? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
What is lust? I mean,
So if you're
Lust,
distinguishing
lust
yourself
is
from what
the
Emily is describing.
lust is the seed of love. Okay, I don't look across
Oh, that's
the
beautiful.
room and
Yeah.
see a person that I'm in
Yeah.
love with. I don't look across
Uh-huh.
the room and see a person um, that has all of the magnificent qualities that I've come to know and cultivate. I see somebody who I want to like get to know in a sexual way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And lust, out of that lust, and who knows where that goes, but speaking personally, at least in the case of my wife, we've been together 25 years. Lust was the seed that grew love,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's a great love, and it's a love that transcends lust and includes so many different other areas. But I'm not going to sit here and lie. The seed of that was lust.
Yeah.
The seed
Yeah.
of
No,
that
that's,
was
yeah.
lust.
So how do we, so you mentioned a minute ago that, some couples can essentially start out with lust, and lose it. And so how does that happen?
Well, um, it can happen in a lot of ways. Sex can start to become a neglected area. It can become an area of what was once familiar now becomes sort of awkward, so
Mm-hmm.
neglected. Sometimes um, there can be a betrayal of trust or a real
Mm-hmm.
betrayal of the core secure attachment. Sometimes it gets lust gets squandered and it can't be found again. Look, I mean, this week alone, I've
Yeah.
worked with couples in which one partner has gone on an antidepressant and
Mm-hmm.
can no longer access his lust or even his arousal. I've dealt with a couple that had tremendous attraction, but there was serious infidelity, and so now there's trauma and fright and an avoidance of touch. I've worked with couples where both couples have sort of let themselves go, or their flirtatious, romantic parts of their personalities have really gone into a kind of hibernation or suspended animation, and there's just no longer that level of attraction. What there is really just familiarity and banality and even some resentment. So I think there's lots of ways in which we can squander the power of lust or dilute it.
And I mean, in a way, you've just answered kind of what I might ask next, which is how might couples in long-term relationships, particularly, because to your point a few minutes ago, when there is lust and attraction at the beginning, that's it just kind of takes care of itself. There's as
Yes,
you say, the Big
yes.
Bang. But in a long-term relationship and let's just say a monogamous marriage, um, how might couples protect it? So I'm hearing a few different things. One is that fidelity kind of or infidelity can create issues of lust in the marriage because there's trust and trauma. Um, I'm also hearing you say that the banality of life and just seeing one another as um, co-partners in life can kind of get in the way, losing our flirtatious edge. So how might couples, if you're speaking to a
Sometimes we
couple
may
at the
have
beginning, Ian, like they come to you, they're all hot and bothered at the beginning, and they say, how do we hang on to this? What would you say?
well, one thing I would say is understand its importance and prioritize
Mm,
sex. Don't let it fall to the
hmm
bottom of the to-do list. So one thing I would say also that, as you mentioned, Sarah, in the beginning of a relationship, we are unknown to each other. There's so much mystery and so much to be discovered. But once everything has been discovered, how do we keep it going?
And is that, let me interrupt for just a sec. Is that unknown? Isn't that part of the lust and the attraction?
Sure, the mystery and the
The
novelty and
mystery of like, who is this person
relationship,
and how
getting
are
to
they
know.
going to see me and all of that?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are human beings. We're novelty seekers in some
Mm-hmm.
ways. We're experience seekers. We get bored in life. We get bored at work. We get bored in our friendships. We're always having to think about how to find novelty in our lives. I think in the beginning of a relationship, we don't have to do that work. Everything is just so new. But certainly, if we can continue to prioritize sex and romance, if we can if we can develop a sexual script, sexual choreography that kind of enshrines mutual pleasure, if we could have the kind of quality sex that motivates us to want to have more of it, that's important. If we can continue to find ways to bring psychological arousal into our sex lives when just the newness of each other is no longer the arousing novelty. But if we can continue to engage our erotic imaginations and find things that psychologically can turn us on together, so there's lots of ways to fortify our sex lives.
I'm curious about, so the last piece of, so two things here, sexual script I'm curious about. So I want to hear about that and what that translates into kind of in practical terms in a long-term relationship or marriage. But also, how how do we keep novelty alive? Because to your point, at the beginning, it's novel by virtue of the fact that it's new. We don't have to do anything. It's novel. And then we understand and know each other, we think. Um, and all of that kind of mystery doesn't exist. So what does it actually look like in practice? How do you create novelty when the structure of daily living is not novel? I think that's what I'm
Right.
trying to ask.
Well, I think you continue to have to find lightness and playfulness in your relationship. I mean, I think first off, outside of just the sexual dynamic, are
Mm,
you in a relationship that's fun and light and playful? Are you in the kind of relationship that your romantic selves get to hang out and connect with each other and then come home and be sexual with each other? Again, are you engaging in the kind of sex that's mutually pleasurable, that motivates you to want to have more of it, so that even if you are not feeling peak desire, you can think to yourself, hey, once I get in there and start to get this going, I'm going to be glad I'm
mm,
there.
hmm
And can you bring some psychological novelty? I mean, when we're little kids, we love nothing more than to role play and to
hmm
engage our imaginations and pretend. And I'm not saying that we need to role play or pretend as adults, but why not? And
hmm
why not engage our erotic imaginations? And why not share our turn-ons? And why not share fantasies or remember those sexy times that we had together? And why not keep playing and approach sex as a form of play?
hmm I'm also thinking too, Ian, that at the beginning, to your point about kind of mystery, there's all that uncertainty. There's a lot of emotional risk at the beginning. But we make a calculation because we're drawn to this other person and they're drawn to us that we're going to overcome that risk of
Hmm.
revealing ourselves.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if I'm curious if part of novelty is continuing to push ourselves to take risk internally, whether that's, to your point, a role play or something that feels uncomfortable. I'm curious about that. What would you say?
Well, again, the first thing I think of, Sarah, is that it's unfortunate that so many of us grew up in sex negative homes and sex
Mm-hmm.
avoidant homes, that we weren't really given that ability to feel free and relaxed when thinking about sex. I don't think it has to be inherently challenging or difficult, or that the fantasies have to be so subversive or so taboo. I think it's more than anything. I mean, to me, the definition of probably great, to me, the definition of great sex is probably the ability to become absorbed together,
Mm-hmm.
to get into a flow state with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think being able to engage our erotic imaginations and get lost in a fantasy together is part of that process of mutual absorption. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think, I'm not sure if you're asking, does it have to be particularly taboo or
No,
subversive?
I what I meant was thank you for clarifying. What I meant was at the beginning, I think part of the novelty and the charge and the excitement is the unknown. We don't know this other person, and there's
Right.
something kind of risky about that, regardless of what we're doing physically.
Totally.
Emotionally, there's something risky about that. Like I'm going to show you who I am and who are you kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. And so
I
I'm
think those
wondering if,
couples
yeah,
that I think that those couples that pick their best friends, are maybe
yeah,
avoiding that risk in some ways. They're
yeah,
protecting
yeah.
themselves against that risk. They've been maybe hurt or burned
Mm-hmm.
by
Mm-hmm.
the risk, and maybe they've been hurt or burned by the risk of vulnerability prior to even ever meeting a romantic partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hurt or burned in their attachments with their, caregivers and their
Mm-hmm.
parents. But I think, yeah, I think when you really are lusting after someone and attracted to someone, and I think the reward comes with the risk. And maybe some of the couples that I'm working with who are
Mm.
sort of like leaving lust off the table and picking their best friends are really hoping for the reward without the risk.
Interesting. Yeah. Safety first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so a couple of questions. In hetero relationships, um, for the couples that come to you who are kind of struggling and in trouble and find their way out, is there kind of a common denominator or two that you can point to?
Well, couples come in struggling in so many different ways when it comes
Mm,
to sex. I mean, I deal with desire discrepancy issues. Deal with problems with sexual function. I deal with all sorts of anxiety. I deal with trauma. I deal with
yeah.
some couples who have partners have compulsive sexual behaviors or seeking escape. And there's trauma, there's infidelity. So there's such a broad range of issues that couples are dealing with. What is a common theme? A common theme is being able to trust enough to take a leap of faith in each other
Mm, mm,
again.
mm,
Some couples just can't get to that place of, well, if we're going to keep doing this, it's going to involve a little bit of a leap of faith. They're so protected, so cautious. So I think it involves a leap of faith. I think the ability to really communicate authentically on the topic and not avoid the tough parts of the conversation is really important. Um, I think having that attraction and lust is always helpful. For example, couples who are dealing with infidelity and the trauma of a broken attraction, having
Mm,
that lust um, helps to heal. It helps to heal. It helps to push you back into potentially back into each other's arms and make that leap of faith when you might not
hmm
otherwise make it. So,
hmm It's interesting as you're talking about leap of faith. I'm thinking about what we were just talking about a few minutes ago, which is that if there's risk. And at the beginning, the risk for novelty is all kind of fun. But then when we're in trouble as a couple, the risk that we need to take emotionally probably feels more treacherous.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of couples that I've worked with, when trying to sexually heal, also want quick results or instant
Mm,
gratifications. I think
hmm
it's easy to go straight to infidelity or to non-monogamy or to finding that initial new relationship energy in somebody else's arms. I think it can be hard to lean into the work that requires time and patience and effort. We don't want to think that sex should require time, patience, or effort. We don't want to think that sex is something that should be scheduled, or sex involves maybe some homework or going to see a therapist. We want to think it's all organic and spontaneous, and if it's not, then there's something that's wrong.
hmm hmm And do you find that of the couples that come to you that because of it, it seems there are options available today that would have been harder to access, let's say in the 50s. We have apps, we have, right. Um, do you find that one or more of the people are thinking that that's probably the answer is to change the construct of the relationship from monogamous to non or poly, or I don't know
Well,
much about this.
I think it's so in the air today
It
that
is, yeah.
more and more couples are coming in with at least one partner feeling like, well, why not just skip to that option?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And sometimes that is a good option. I
I
mean,
was going to
sometimes
ask you, and when is that? Yeah.
it's sort of like, do you really want to throw out the baby with like the bathwater? Like, why not outsource the sex if it's a part of the relationship that's really not working? Why shouldn't we be entitled, if we can't make it work anymore and we've tried within a monogamous relationship, but so many other parts of the relationship are really working, and there's such a primary story still to the relationship. Why
Mm-hmm.
not try and outsource this
Mm-hmm.
part that's not working
Mm-hmm.
anymore?
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned we've got just a little bit of time here. And I've heard you speak on this before. Um, and my understanding is desire discrepancy is not uncommon. Is that one of the primary reasons people are coming to you? Is yeah, I think that I've heard you say that
Yeah,
before.
yeah, one partner, either both partners are sort of sexually shut down, and are missing sex in some way, or one partner has a higher libido than the other partner, um, trying to find a common desire framework, getting back to mutual desire. I would say that's probably the biggest issue that couples come in with, something that would fall under what we would call like a desire issue, basically.
And Ian, I'm curious at the beginning, so circling back to the beginning of our conversation and the importance of lust, I'm guessing, I'm totally guessing, you tell me, that a desire discrepancy doesn't show up for a little bit.
That is correct. If two partners are beginning with lust and in the beginning of a relationship, it's relatively simple. We're not showing up with all the stressors of life. We're just showing up for each other. A desire discrepancy can be hidden. Um, also, we're under the influence of a sort of a neurochemical cocktail in the beginning of a relationship. We are, drinking from the martini glass of infatuation.
And it's so great. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the problem is, and again, you can continue to have a lot of lust, but it may not get expressed anymore in the ways in which it got
Mm,
expressed in the very beginning.
nice, nice, nice. All right. I know I've got you for just a couple more minutes. I'm going to ask you the question I ask these days of all interviewees for the Making Magnificence project. What does magnificence mean to you in your own life?
What does magnificence mean? It means getting to be present in
Mm,
life and just appreciate everything that's around me and getting to be in flow with life. And, I've stopped writing books for a little while because I've been doing it for 25 years and I can no longer exist with a deadline hanging over my head, which, leads me to live in two different worlds. One, the world of people around me, and the other, the world inside my head of what I'm supposed to be creating and thinking about. I want to have both feet sort of
mm,
in the
mhm.
world these days. And so magnificence to me is having both feet in the world and being able to appreciate everything and everyone around me and coming in to anything I do and being able to be present and not have to worry about something.
That's lovely. Magnificence as presence. That's beautiful. Ian, before we close out, if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way to do that?
To go to my website, iankerner.com, I try and keep it updated with whatever articles or podcasts I'm doing.
Okay, great. My guest today has been Ian Kerner, a licensed psychotherapist and nationally recognized sex therapist. Ian Kerner, thank you for this interview.
You're very welcome, Sarah. It was great to see you. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Me too.